We're going to talk about the progression toward panic and deep diving into it a little bit more. It's just a topic that a lot of people in the group struggle with. So if you have panic attacks or you've experienced it before, this is a thing that you're dealing with now, it's totally fine. You're not alone. A lot of people are experiencing this, especially now these days. So we want to understand the first step to dealing with panic is actually understanding what happens because there's a kind of built-in fear around panic that we can't handle the experience because it's so intense and it's so overwhelming. So we have thoughts like, okay, well, what if I pass out? What if I embarrass myself in front of other people? What if I can't stop the feeling and it just takes me over completely? But we know scientifically that panic is a false alarm in our system. It's an over exaggerated response of the nervous system. So it's not like anything's wrong. It's just that your system is perceiving something as dangerous. And the response is an over exaggerated response. A lot of people will feel like panic is something that's inherently wrong with their body or with their mind. And they automatically go to thinking that I have to stop this right now, right? Or else I'm going to lose control. If I don't fix this, then it'll never go away. It means that something's wrong with me. And so what we want to do is actually challenge those beliefs and actually see what's real, right? What is true. I was going to do this whole like scientific spiel on what happens to your nervous system during panic, but I actually just found this video and they explain it a lot better than I ever could. So I'm going to share this. It's about like 4 minutes or so.
The body becomes its own corset. Past, present, and future exist as a single force. A swing without gravity soars to a terrifying height. The outlines of people and things dissolve. Countless poets and writers have tried to put words to the experience of a panic attack. A sensation so overwhelming, many people mistake it for a heart attack, stroke, or other life-threatening crisis. Though panic attacks don't cause long-term physical harm, afterwards, the fear of another attack can limit someone's daily life and cause more panic attacks. Studies suggest that almost a third of us will experience at least one panic attack in our lives. And whether it's your first, your 100th, or you're witnessing someone else go through one, no one wants to repeat the experience. Even learning about them can be uncomfortable, but it's necessary, because the first step to preventing panic attacks is understanding them. At its core, a panic attack is an overreaction to the body's normal physiological response to the perception of danger. This response starts with the amygdala, the brain region involved in processing fear. When the amygdala perceives danger, it stimulates the sympathetic nervous system, which triggers the release of adrenaline. Adrenaline prompts an increase in the heart and breathing rate to get blood and oxygen to the muscles of the arms and legs. This also sends oxygen to the brain, making it more alert and responsive. During a panic attack, this response is exaggerated well past what would be useful in a dangerous situation, causing a racing heart, heavy breathing, or hyperventilation. The changes to blood flow cause lightheadedness and numbness in the hands and feet. A panic attack usually peaks within 10 minutes. Then, the prefrontal cortex takes over from the amygdala and stimulates the parasympathetic nervous system. This triggers the release of a hormone called acetylcholine that decreases the heart rate and gradually winds down the panic attack. In a panic attack, the body's perception of danger is enough to trigger the response we would have to a real threat, and then some. We don't know for sure why this happens, but sometimes cues in the environment that remind us of traumatic past experience can trigger a panic attack. Panic attacks can be part of anxiety disorders like PTSD, social anxiety disorder, OCD, and generalized anxiety disorder. Recurring panic attacks, frequent worry about new attacks, and behavioral changes to avoid panic attacks can lead to a diagnosis of a panic disorder. The two
Okay, that's the physiological response that we're having. If we're experiencing anxiety, like mild anxiety, to the spectrum of panic. So even if you aren't in the middle of a panic attack and you're just experiencing some anxiety, there's some of the same physiological response that's happening. So it's helpful to understand that, to know what's happening in the body, just so that you have some sense of, okay, like peak panic attacks, they usually last 10 minutes. And then at the 10-minute mark, your prefrontal cortex can start to kick in again and start to ground yourself in the present moment. Okay, so even if you're not experiencing a panic attack, whenever you're experiencing anxiety of any sort, the more that we can ground in the present moment, the more we are able to handle the anxiety. Okay, how do we get the prefrontal cortex back online? How do we get the nervous system to switch from fight and flight mode to rest and digest mode, which is our kind of sense of relaxation? We move into as much presence and awareness as possible. And that's very counter to what we typically do, right? We typically want to run away. We typically want to fix it. We typically get lost in the swirl of thoughts that are happening. A couple of ways that we can deal with this is, one, in real time. What are the things that we can do in real time when you're experiencing any kind of anxiety, all the way up to, let's say, panic is probably the most extreme experience of anxiety that we can potentially have. So strategy number one is simply to, and this is what all of the neuroscientists are saying as well, is that we're trying to ground in physical reality. And the more that we can do that, the more that the nervous system starts to relax, because it can see that there's actually no threat happening. And again, this is not just for panic attacks, it's for any kind of anxiety that you're experiencing, is one, feet on the ground. So when you feel anxiety, when you feel the panic starting, for the time being, we just bring our attention and awareness to the body. So feet on the ground, you can press, and you can try this now just to see what kind of impact that it has on your nervous system. So pressing your feet firmly into the ground and actually bringing your attention to feel the pressure beneath your feet. Yeah, you can stand up. You can do this while you're sitting down, whatever is most comfortable for you. So notice the sensation here. Notice if the feet are warm, if there's a cool sensation, if there's a hard sensation underneath, or maybe there's some cushioning underneath you. Just notice the physical quality there. And just take like 30 seconds just to really tune into it. And in the same way that we were practicing on meditation, if you find that your thoughts are trying to pull you out, just notice that and bring your attention back to the sensation of your feet. And just notice the impact, even if it's subtle, notice the impact that that has on the overall sense of how you feel. Okay, so the science behind this is that it interrupts the danger signals in your brain, and it's signaling to your nervous system that you're actually here in this moment. There's no lion that's attacking you. There's nothing physically threatening to you in the moment, and that you're safe. Yeah. So a lot of times, I'm sure you guys can relate to this, that anxiety pulls us into worst case what if scenarios. Yeah. So if you go down that spiral, we've talked about this before in the past too, when we bring our attention to the physical body, so feet on the ground anchors you into the physical reality. the present moment. Yeah. If we're in the orientation of trying to fix the panic or fix the anxiety, make it go away. In other words, if I'm trying to make my breath be a particular way in order to get rid of anxiety or get rid of panic, it's only reinforcing whatever's underneath that. So actually, what we want to do in all of this is to have an underlying sense of okayness. And that underlying sense of okayness needs to be the foundation for all of this, right? Because otherwise, we're basically still telling to our nervous system, this feeling that I'm having is not okay. I need to get rid of it. And you can apply whatever technique that you want, but if this sort of self-rejection of the experience is underpinning it, that's where it gets worse, right? Where we continue to reject the anxiety, we reject the panic, we reject the sensations, we're trying to get it to go away. It kind of brings me to another point that I want to make today is, okay, a lot of times when you go to, we go to a therapist or we go to a psychiatrist to talk about panic disorder or anything like that, most likely the routes that they're going to put you in is a medication route, which is fine, or they'll put you into a cognitive behavioral therapy route, the CBT route,
Mhm.
right? Okay, so those are all great. Those are things that actually need to happen. But a lot of times what's happening for many people is the interior threat. So we can tend to perceive exterior threats, right? Like a presentation, a meeting, any sort of thing that happens on the outside can be an exterior threat. But sometimes what will happen is that we end up being afraid. And in some cases, this is even more intensely afraid of what's happening inside of us.
Mhm.
We can build up a lot of guilt or shame inside in our inner experience. And if that's the thing that we're afraid of, then you cannot get away from it, right? So trying to avoid whatever situation on the outside doesn't work. Whatever's happening on the inside stays with you.
Mhm.
So we then create this nervous system baseline that's constantly afraid of the inner experience of guilt or shame, self-judgment, whatever it is, that it's like we can't face ourselves. So when that happens, obviously, we cannot avoid our inner experience, no matter how much that we try. And the panic is sort of like if we continue to repress that, if we continue to try to avoid that, then it just gets amplified even more. Okay.
Yeah.
This is what I always say, and I know it's not easy. This is the process that I went through too. I went through a time period where I was so ashamed of what was happening, the choices that I was making, or anything that was happening in my life at the time, just like the way that I was being and my sense of who I was at the moment, in the moment, was a source of anxiety. All right, so what do we do about that? Well, unfortunately, we have to really face it. We have to turn toward ourselves and trust me, I don't like this expression at all, but you have to look yourself in the mirror at some point and say, listen, this is happening inside myself. There are things that I am not happy with and that I'm afraid to deal with. And that is the first step. And if there are things inside yourself that you are avoiding, I'll tell you right now that you're not going to get away from that. So we have to, at some point, come to grips with that and really allow ourselves to learn, one, how to be okay with that. That's the first step is, can I be okay with where I'm at, no matter what, right? So any kind of hiding from ourselves or any kind of avoiding our inner experience or who we are, any part of who we are, will create anxiety off of that because it means that we have to hide something, we have to be a particular way, we have to put on a persona. So, in other words, any separation from our authenticity, who we are, faults and all, right? Strengths and weaknesses, good things, bad things, shameful things, praisable things, all of it, that has to happen first. We cannot self-improve our way out of it. We can't just replace the thinking behind it.
Mm-hmm.
We have to touch into the substance of what's actually happening in us. We first start to actually allow and see what we're not okay with, right? And it's not a matter of forcing yourself to be like, I accept myself, like an
Mm-hmm.
affirmation or something like. And I did affirmations for 10 years, and it was okay, but certainly didn't help anything on deeper levels. So what needs to happen is that we actually need to go through and process these parts of ourselves that we are ashamed of. And the first step is to become aware of them, right? Like we actually might not know because they're so repressed, the
Mm-hmm.
parts of ourselves that we're ashamed about, right? Like for me, I was ashamed about my own anger and my own frustration and hatred. So there's dynamics behind that where we have to say, okay, if I'm really looking at myself, why is it not okay for me to have these parts of myself? Why is it not okay for me to be angry and frustrated and hateful? Well, okay, there's certain reasons why, right? And that's part of the process. Looking at these things with more awareness and more presence so that we can see, okay, I learned this somewhere along the way for my own
Mm-hmm.
survival, safety, acceptance, right? Approval, my own value. That was certainly the case for me. For me, it was a survival issue. If I ever showed any kind of anger, I would be physically unsafe and likely verbally and emotionally unsafe. So that has a certain imprint on the nervous system. Yeah. So it could be any number of things though, because our experience as human beings are so vast. So, I've worked with people who have gotten abused before, and have gotten, um, they've gone through a nightmare of a life, you know, and they've had to suppress in order to function and to actually survive in their life. And at some point when it's stable enough, then these things come back around and they have to actually face that. So what does facing it mean? It means actually letting yourself feel the sensation, the emotions, the whole sort of dynamic around these things, the inner experience of what happened to you. And all of that is stored in the nervous system. It doesn't go away. So in a way, it's a journey toward becoming more aware. And with that awareness comes more compassion and acceptance. That's not forced. We don't force that. Just like we don't, at least in my experience, I have not found a way to force myself to forgive myself or anybody else.
Mm-hmm.
How does forgiveness happen? We have to feel the pain, either of what we caused or what was done to us. And as we feel the pain, there's actually real compassion and healing that comes. But here's the trick. It only happens when we're present.
Mm-hmm.
It only happens when we're in touch with it. So it's not just pain that's present. There's also compassion and love and acceptance that's present. But we can't manufacture that. As we do this process, as you let yourself feel these things, you will start to actually directly know that that's true. Not like a mental note, not like, okay, like I'm gonna tell myself these things. No, it's like you actually know this in your system. So how do we do this? We just simply let yourself feel the actual physical sensation of the pain. The emotional pain has actually a physical quality to it. You feel it in our body, you feel it in the heart. It's not as if we just switch on a button inside of ourselves and all of a sudden we're like good to go. These are all processes where we're developing that acceptance and we're developing that mental focus. We're developing compassion. You don't really realize it until you're in a position where come into a sort of realization that it can be different. You run into somebody, like for me, I ran into teachers, like priests, ministers, teachers who they had some kind of quality about them in the way that they interacted with me, where I was like, that's not part of my world. Like, where does that come? Where does this compassion come from? And that's what I hope that you guys are getting from this. I'm hoping that you can feel the acceptance, because that's more important than anything else, is that feeling the acceptance and the okayness in the group, in the field. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That in itself will help you give yourself permission to go to these places, to actually tap into the same kind of acceptance and compassion and understanding. And that's ultimately my service to you, because I've had people help me with that. And it took me a long time to accept these different parts of myself. And certainly I'm not perfect. And certainly there's still things in me that I'm sort of like, okay, there's just some work to be done. But what I do know is that underlying acceptance, I used to hear that and call bullshit on it. It's like, there's no way that somebody can accept me. But that is until I experience that in myself.
Mm-hmm.
That's really what I want you guys to get from this. Yes, we're going to give you tools and techniques. We're going to kind of give you a lot of things that you can develop and work on. But underlying all of it is really a sense of no matter where you are and no matter how you're showing up, that it's all fine, that you're totally okay. And it's my hope that you'll feel that at some point and that you can rely on that.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So we're going to end there for today. I'm getting over a little bit of a flu. I'm not exactly sure what it is, but we'll end there for today and we'll be back next week. And great to be with you guys. And we'll be back next week. And feel free to reach out.
Okay.
Questions, okay?